And I'm still playing Spock. We just made Star Trek V just before I left the States.
Not another one.
Yeah, another one.
In 1956, a desperate actor picked up JFK in his taxicab for $1.25. That same man would later become Spock and earn millions. But fame came with a price Leonard Nimoy never expected. The character took over his life completely.
Thank heaven.
Mr. Scott, there was no deity involved. It was my cross-circuiting to be that recovered them.
He couldn't turn it off. His marriage crumbled. His son stopped speaking to him for 5 years. The drinking got worse. Then he made a choice that surprised Hollywood. The truth about what really happened will change how you see Star Trek forever. Leonard Simon Nimoy was born on March 26, 1931, in Boston's West End, a tight, noisy place packed with Irish families and recent immigrants. But inside his family's apartment, the language wasn't English. It was Yiddish. His parents, Max and Dora, had escaped from Izyaslav, Ukraine, not as travelers, but as survivors. Max had crossed the Polish border on foot in the dark, hoping not to be shot. Dora and Leonard's grandmother had been hidden under hay in a horse-drawn wagon, smuggled out of the Soviet Union. They arrived separately, reunited in Boston in 1923, and tried to build something steady. They kept kosher, held fast to their Orthodox roots, and squeezed 3 generations into a cramped tenement. Leonard grew up sharing the apartment with his grandparents, his older brother Melvin, who was born in 1926, and his parents. They didn't have much, but they had rules, rituals, and the weight of memory on their backs. Max became a barber and worked 6 days a week in Mattapan, cutting hair beside Leonard's grandfather to feed the household. Saturdays were always busy at the shop, but they adjusted their observance to keep the business going. Dora was razor-sharp with money. When Leonard needed portrait clothes, she didn't buy anything. She made them from scraps: white shirt, fancy collar, pants, all stitched by hand. By 10, Leonard was selling newspapers on Boston Common. It didn't stop there. He shined shoes, set up chairs in theaters, sold greeting cards. Later, he filled vending machines, scooped ice cream, ushered in movie theaters. Max even worked a second job, making leather luggage patterns. They survived because everybody worked. But Leonard wanted something else. Melvin was the golden child, the steady one, headed straight for MIT and a future as a chemical engineer. He spent hours in the science lab at the Elizabeth Peabody House. That same building had a theater downstairs. That's where Leonard went. At 8, he performed in Hansel and Gretel in a 375-seat room that smelled of sawdust and glue. He stayed in that theater wing every chance he got, mimicking radio voices, putting on shows. But Max wasn't impressed. He told Leonard flatly, "I didn't walk here from Russia so you could be an actor." He didn't want artists in the family. He wanted survival. He told Leonard to learn the accordion so he could always make money, no matter where life took them. But Leonard wasn't listening anymore. At 17, Leonard played Ralphie in Awake and Sing, a play about a poor Jewish family in the Bronx. The story felt like his own. Same tensions, same tiny kitchen, same kinds of arguments. That role lit something in him that wouldn't go out. He didn't want anything else. He had already been singing in synagogue choirs since he was 11, and when he did his bar mitzvah at 13, it was so beautiful that a rabbi from another synagogue asked him to do it again the next week for their congregation. William Shatner would later say, Leonard was the only man whose voice was 2 bar mitzvahs good. Leonard's grandfather quietly supported his dream. While his parents kept pressuring him toward safety, his grandfather whispered encouragement. Leonard started saving. He went door to door selling vacuum cleaners around Washington and Boylston Street. Eventually, he saved $600. That was enough. He left Boston College and bought a coach seat on a train. 3 days, 3 nights, straight to California. He used the money to enroll at the Pasadena Playhouse, paying $400 for the first year. But after 6 months, he quit. He said he was already doing better work than the students around him. He got a $47 refund, walked out, and started knocking on agent doors. Within a year, he was filming his first movie. He didn't stop working. He drove taxis. He worked as a theater usher. He kept vending machines filled. He also acted in Yiddish theater, performing with legends like Maurice Schwartz and Chaim Tauber. It wasn't just work, it was home. In 1971, when he played Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, he called it a homecoming. His parents were from a Russian shtetl just like the one in the play. Back in Boston, he'd taken part in a summer theater program at Boston College. It was run by a Jesuit priest, Father John Bon. The students would rehearse, perform, build sets, and sleep on stage. Leonard was the only Jewish kid in the program, but he felt completely at peace. That's when he started getting interested in method acting, reading Stanislavski, and idolizing Marlon Brando. He started wearing jeans and t-shirts and digging into the emotional lives of his characters like it was real life. On December 3, 1953, Leonard enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserve at Fort McPherson, Georgia. He was 22 and needed income so he could marry his fiancée Sandra Zober. They got married in 1954 while he was still in uniform. The Korean War had just ended, but the draft was still active. Acting wasn't paying. His last movie, Kid Monk Baroni, had flopped. He was delivering newspapers to get by. The Army paid $75 a month and gave him housing. By the time he was discharged on November 23, 1955, he'd reached Staff Sergeant E6, a huge leap in just 18 months. He wasn't just a soldier. He joined the Army's Special Services, the entertainment branch. He wrote, narrated, and hosted variety shows for other soldiers. He also wrote skits that poked fun at Army bureaucracy and regulations. The soldiers loved it. These shows helped keep them sane. Leonard learned how to read a crowd, adjust his tone, and hold their attention, skills that would become gold later in Hollywood. At Fort Benning and Fort McPherson, he did something wild. By day, he trained soldiers. By night, he joined the Atlanta Theater Guild and directed A Streetcar Named Desire, starring as Stanley Kowalski. It was one of the most emotionally brutal roles in theater. Leonard played it while still reporting for 6 a.m. drills. He mentored young recruits like Private Ken Berry, who later starred in sitcoms. The discipline Leonard learned from juggling both worlds would shape how he worked for the rest of his life. On a 1954 recruiting tour across Southern colleges, Leonard ran into hate. He performed solo shows that included integrated casts, black and white characters together. Some crowds hurled slurs and objects at him. It didn't stop him. He kept doing it, kept pushing. Those moments stayed with him. They sharpened his view of justice. Years later, through the Susan and Leonard Nimoy Foundation, he'd put real money behind equality efforts. But the pain started on those college stages, where some people didn't want to see equality acted out at all. When he left the Army in November 1955, he got on a bus back to Los Angeles. He had his discharge papers, his service number, ER 229 7705, and no money. Sandra was pregnant with their second child. He had to hustle. Within 72 hours of becoming a civilian, he was auditioning again. To survive, he drove taxis. In 1956, he once picked up Senator John F. Kennedy, who didn't have any cash and made Leonard follow him into the Beverly Hilton to get paid. He left him a $1.75 tip, but Leonard never forgot what the Army taught him: how to hold a room, how to switch tones, how to deliver something people didn't know they needed. 11 years later, in 1966, he became Spock. But that version of him was built long before the pointy ears. It was shaped in the tenements of Boston, the community theater basements, the Army bases, the back of taxis, and the quiet battles against fear and expectation. Everything started long before Star Trek. Everything started when Leonard decided he wasn't going to be anybody else's version of safe. In 1955, Leonard Nimoy came back from the Army with nothing but dreams and a hungry family. He was a staff sergeant when he left, but in Los Angeles, rank meant nothing. He had a wife to care for, Sandra Zober, and soon 2 kids, Julie, born March 21, 1955, and Adam, born August 9, 1956. There was no money, no job, and no certainty. Just long days chasing auditions, and even longer nights working anything he could find. He became a taxi driver, a newspaper boy, a vending machine repairman, a pet shop helper, a fish tank installer, and a freezer salesman knocking on doors. And when all of that didn't cover rent, he'd shine shoes or sell greeting cards like he did when he was 6 years old in Boston's West End, learning survival in cold streets long before he ever wore a Starfleet uniform. On August 13, 1956, when Leonard was 24, he got a cab call to the Bel Air Hotel to pick up someone named Mr. Kennedy. When the tall man got in, Leonard said, "How are things up in Massachusetts, Senator?" John F. Kennedy smiled and started asking him questions about Boston, about his immigrant parents, about why he came to California. They talked politics, Adlai Stevenson's chances, family. When they reached the Beverly Hilton, Kennedy said he had no cash. So Leonard followed him into the lobby to collect the $1.25 fare. Kennedy handed him 2 crisp bills, one for the fare and a $1.75 tip. Leonard never forgot that moment, not because of the money, but because someone had seen him not just as a driver, but as a person. But kindness didn't pay rent. By 1957, things hit rock bottom. The family was squeezed into a shabby apartment. Jobs weren't coming. Food was short. Leonard was sleeping 4 hours a night and still barely surviving. He landed scraps, tiny roles in shows like Perry Mason and Dragnet, and low-budget sci-fi like Zombies of the Stratosphere, where he wore a suffocating rubber alien suit in the Mojave Desert under 100-degree heat, losing 15 pounds in 6 weeks, while earning just $150 a week. Ice buckets were kept nearby in case actors passed out. There were no stunt doubles. There was no relief. That same year, he managed to land a lead role in Kid Monk Baroni, playing a street kid turned boxer. He believed this would change everything. He invested $500 of his own money for headshots and promo materials, trying to get noticed. But the movie flopped hard, barely pulling in $100,000. Leonard couldn't recover the cost. He was $500 in debt, around $5,800 in today's money, and had to return to cab driving and teach acting classes at $5 a student just to keep the lights on. He took a job managing an apartment building in North Hollywood to get free rent, but that meant knocking on doors, demanding money from tenants who were just as broke as him. It made him sick. He had seen his own neighbors evicted back in Boston during the Depression. Now, he was the one delivering that pain. One night, a man he was supposed to evict threatened to kill him. Leonard stood frozen, not as an actor, but as a father with mouths to feed. He quit soon after, but the fear stayed with him. He became an usher at the Pantages Theater, guiding people to their seats during shows like Oklahoma. While others watched the musicals, Leonard memorized lines. He used the job as a free acting school. He slipped backstage to talk to stars, desperate to learn. He got fired for it, but the lessons stuck. By 1958, he was cast in The Brain Eaters, shot in 8 days for under $50,000. They used real bugs instead of props. One beetle bit Leonard on the neck, triggering a severe allergic reaction. His face swelled up badly. The director didn't stop. They kept filming and wrote the swelling into the story. Leonard paid $75 out of pocket for the medical bills and called it the worst film I ever made. The next few years were a blur of rejection and exhaustion. On Dragnet, he played a switchblade thug. On Perry Mason, a cold-blooded killer. Directors liked his intense stare and sharp cheekbones. But after 20 roles as crooks and creeps, casting directors stopped seeing him as anything else. He was the go-to villain who made $200 to $400 an episode. Enough to scrape by, never enough to rest. In 1963, he was broke again. He had been in over 50 shows but had nothing to show for it. Reruns paid nothing. He started selling Electrolux vacuums door to door. One day, he knocked on a door, and the man who opened it was a casting director who had just rejected him the week before. The door slammed in his face. He went back to taxi driving at night, earning $40 a shift. His yearly income was about $8,000, barely above poverty. In 1964, everything changed. Gene Roddenberry was casting for a new sci-fi pilot called Star Trek. He'd heard about Leonard from Gary Lockwood. Leonard auditioned for the role of a half-human, half-Vulcan named Spock. The early makeup tests were a disaster. Papier-mâché and latex turned his ears into something between a rabbit and a gremlin. He threatened to quit. Eventually, John Chambers sculpted the pointed ears we know now. They were glued on and dissolved with solvent, meaning each pair was ruined after one use. Leonard hated them so much that Roddenberry promised they could remove the ears if he still hated them by episode 13. He stayed, and in September 1967, during filming of the episode Amok Time, Leonard created the Vulcan salute, lifting his hand with fingers split in the middle, based on the Jewish priestly blessing he had seen as a child. The same fingers his father told him never to look at. The same fingers that would later be printed on merchandise across the world. But as the show grew, so did the pressure. Fans flooded him with 2,700 letters a week. 70% came from women. They called it Spock Mania. During a parade in 1967, Leonard appeared in full Spock makeup. The crowd swelled so violently that the stage beneath him started to buckle. Police had to pull him out. At a store event, crowd pressure broke the gates. He escaped through the roof and climbed down a fire truck ladder to safety. The more famous he got, the more exhausted he became. After long filming days, he started with 2 glasses of wine. Then it became beer. Then whiskey. 5 days a week, he lived as Spock. Stoic, logical, emotionless. On weekends, he found he couldn't switch it off. It was no longer acting. It was seeping into him. By the end of the second season, things got worse. He had creative fights with Roddenberry, who demanded a cut from Nimoy's music albums. They started writing letters instead of talking. Leonard's salary was $1,250 per episode, while Shatner made $5,000. When his agent asked for $9,000, Roddenberry threatened to fire him. They had a replacement list ready. Mark Leonard, Lawrence Montaigne, David Carradine. NBC didn't let it happen. They knew Spock was gold. Leonard stayed, now earning $2,500 per episode, plus $100 in expenses and script input. Still, the pressure didn't let up. He played Spock 12 to 14 hours a day. Fans couldn't separate the character from the man. At conventions, they treated him like a real Vulcan. Some wrote angry letters. Some became dangerous. At a 1977 convention, Leonard took the stage and said, "I am here because my heart is broken." He meant it. In 1975, he wrote a book titled I Am Not Spock. He only wanted to explain the difference between himself and the role, but fans saw it as a rejection. Headlines claimed he hated Spock. It followed him for years. He kept working. He voiced Spock in the animated series from 1973 to 1974. He made sure the original cast got credit. The show won an Emmy, but people still called him Spock on the street. In 1979, during Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Leonard almost didn't return. He was suing Paramount for using his image without permission. A Heineken ad had mocked Spock. Jeffrey Katzenberg tracked him down during his Equus run on Broadway. Paramount sent a check. Leonard returned, but only with full script approval. The filming was chaos. Scripts changed hourly. He rewrote scenes with Roddenberry and Shatner in between takes. In 1984, Leonard Nimoy stood at the edge of something he never imagined when Star Trek began. He had one condition for returning to play Spock again. He wanted to direct. It was his first time leading a feature film, and the search for Spock became his personal mission. The budget was tight, just $16 million, but he poured himself into every detail. On June 1, 1984, the movie opened and stunned everyone, pulling in more than $16 million in its first week, and even beating Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. By the time it finished its run, it had made $76 million in the US and $87 million worldwide. Leonard had done something no one else in the cast had done. He had taken the captain's chair behind the camera and delivered. 3 years later, in 1987, he took on something even more unexpected: a comedy. Three Men and a Baby looked nothing like science fiction. Tom Selleck, Steve Guttenberg, and Ted Danson were the stars. Selleck didn't think the quiet, serious Spock guy could handle warm comedy. He even joked about it years later on Late Night with Seth Meyers. But Nimoy surprised everyone again. The film crushed the box office, beating Fatal Attraction and making $167 million in the US and Canada, with $240 million worldwide. It became the top-grossing American movie of 1987. Selleck later called Nimoy a lovely guy and said he was nothing like Spock. He was warm, funny, and a truly fine director. The People's Choice Award in 1988 sealed it. This was no fluke. Leonard Nimoy wasn't just Spock anymore. But just as he found his place behind the camera, his past came crawling back in the strangest way. In 1967, long before directing hits, Nimoy released a song called The Ballad of Bilbo Baggins. It was supposed to be light and fun. Instead, it turned into something he'd call his biggest embarrassment. He wore his Spock haircut, sang about hobbits, and danced on a beach with young women in pointed ears. The video aired on Malibu U and became infamous. Years later, it was rediscovered on the Funk Me Up Scotty documentary and played over 100 times on the Dr. Demento show. Fans laughed. Leonard winced. It never went away. And in 2007, he did something that made people talk all over again, but not with laughter this time. He released The Full Body Project, a photo series of plus-size women in classical nude poses. It shocked many. Some accused him of glorifying obesity, but Nimoy defended it. A 250-pound woman had asked him years earlier to show beauty in different bodies. His wife Susan told him to shoot nude. He was nervous, not because of nudity, but because he wanted to get it right. He had been taking pictures since age 14, and this time he used that skill to stand up for something bigger than himself. Critics kept talking, but Nimoy stood firm. These were real people, full-bodied and full-blooded, he said. They deserved to feel seen. Then came 2009. At 78, he returned to Spock in J.J. Abrams' reboot. But this time, he played the older version, Spock Prime, stuck in a new timeline, trying to guide a younger self, played by Zachary Quinto. Nimoy had chosen Quinto himself. During filming, a transporter scene left Leonard with a pinched nerve. He nearly quit, but he didn't. He stayed, coached Quinto on how to carry Spock's emotional weight, and gave his blessing to a new era. On screen, Spock watched his planet burn. Off screen, Leonard passed the torch. Behind these triumphs was pain. His first marriage to Sandra Zober had begun on January 1, 1954. They stayed married 33 years and had 2 children, Julie and Adam. But in the mid-1980s, Leonard began an affair with a fan he met at a convention. Sandra had supported him when he was unknown, when he drove cabs, and they lived in a cramped apartment. The betrayal crushed her. Their divorce came in 1987, the same year his father Max died. The grief hit Leonard hard. He drank heavily. He avoided mirrors. He later said he couldn't stand to look at himself. It became the darkest period of his life. That same decade, in 1980, his son Adam confronted him. Adam was 24 and furious. He said Leonard had missed birthdays, school plays, and baseball games. Conventions and filming had always come first. The argument ended with silence. 5 years of it. Adam ignored invitations to movie premieres. He returned tickets without opening them. Leonard cried in hotel rooms after events, wondering how strangers knew Spock better than his own son. He began therapy in 1985. Slowly, Adam came back into his life. They had dinners, they talked, but the wounds never fully healed. After the divorce, Nimoy met actress Susan Bay. She was calm, smart, and understanding. They married on January 1st, 1988, exactly 34 years after his first wedding. Susan brought peace, but even peace had its limits. Their honeymoon in Paris in 1989 turned into a nightmare. Paparazzi surrounded their hotel. Some climbed fire escapes. Others followed them into restaurants. Nimoy's old trauma from obsessive fans returned. In the 1970s, one fan had even broken into his house while his children were home. In Paris, he needed anxiety medication. They cut the trip short, returning to California in just 5 days. His body paid the price for years of stress and addiction. He had started smoking at age 13. By his 20s, he was smoking 60 cigarettes a day, 3 packs. Even during Star Trek, he smoked. In 2014, at 83, doctors told him he had COPD. His lungs worked at only 30%. He quit immediately. He began tweeting about the dangers of smoking, showing his oxygen tanks, begging fans not to follow his path. His final tweet came on February 23, 2015. It said, "Don't smoke. I did. Wish I never had. LLAP." 4 days later, on February 27th, he died at home in Bel Air. He was 83. In his final week, he couldn't breathe without machines. He whispered through his oxygen mask. He asked nurses for euthanasia, but it wasn't legal. Susan stayed by his side, holding his hand. That morning, knowing it was the end, he removed the mask and used his last breath to whisper, "I love you." Then, he was gone. His son Adam made a documentary the next year called For the Love of Spock. It was personal. It showed not just the legacy of Spock, but the pain of being his son. Julie, his daughter, later made another film, remembering Leonard Nimoy, focused on his illness. Fans learned what the costume had hidden. Leonard Nimoy had earned 3 Emmy nominations, but his real impact was bigger than awards. In 2015, just months after his death, asteroid 4864 was officially named Nimoy. It was 6 miles wide, orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. NASA paid tribute. The Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles named a theater after him. Spock had inspired scientists, engineers, and dreamers. But there were still wounds. In 2012, William Shatner filmed a documentary, and his crew secretly recorded Nimoy at a comic convention. Nimoy never forgave him. They never spoke again. When Leonard died in 2015, Shatner didn't attend the funeral. He had a charity event that day and said Leonard would have wanted that. Years later, Julie told Shatner something that brought him peace. "He loved you," she said. "I want you to know that he loved you." Leonard never hid his Jewish identity. In 1991, he produced Never Forget, about a Holocaust survivor fighting neo-Nazi deniers. In 2011, he wrote an open letter calling for a 2-state solution between Israel and Palestine. He even used a Star Trek episode, "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield," to explain why blame didn't help. Fans praised him. Others pushed back. But Leonard never stopped speaking from his heart. When he died, President Barack Obama called him a lifelong supporter of science and the arts. "I loved Spock," Obama said. He was the center of Star Trek's hopeful vision for the future. Nimoy's final message, tweeted days before his death, was shared by over 38,000 people within hours. "A life is like a garden," it read. "Perfect moments can be had, but not preserved, except in memory." LLAP. And just like that, Leonard Nimoy became more than a character, more than a director, more than a man.